The notification on my phone screen didn't say happy birthday. It was a calendar alert rent due. I sat on the edge of my bed in the gray light of 6 in the morning and wrote the check just like I did on the 20th of every month. $1,800 made payable to Prescott Real Estate Holdings. My hand didn't shake, and my penmanship was perfect because sloppy records are a liability, but the irony bit down hard enough to draw blood. I was turning 39 years old today, and my birthday gift to myself was writing a check to a company my father owned for an apartment my mother allowed me to live in, provided I stayed invisible. I set the check on the nightstand and picked up my phone again. No texts, no missed calls. My thumb hovered over the Instagram icon, a reflex I hated but couldn't stop. I tapped it. The algorithm knew exactly how to hurt me. The first image was a throwback photo Tiffany had posted 3 days ago. Missing summer vibes. It was from her 24th birthday party 3 months ago. I stared at the photo of my younger sister in a shimmering gold dress, laughing with her head thrown back, surrounded by 200 guests at the country club. My parents were in the background, beaming in a way I had only ever seen them look at her. I had been there, of course. I was the one holding her purse while she cut the cake. I was the one who coordinated the caterers when the champagne ran low. I was the shadow in the corner of the frame, cropped out at the elbow. I closed the app and swallowed the familiar chalky taste of resignation. 39 years. You would think I would stop expecting the math to change. The phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. The name on the screen made my heart stutter. Grandma Constance. She never called this early. Grandma was 84 and usually respected the unspoken rule that Prescott women did not disturb the peace before 10. I swiped right. Meredith? Her voice scratched through the speaker, breathless and sounding younger than she had in years. Listen to me carefully. I need you to go to Raymond Ashford's office. 10 o'clock sharp. Is everything okay? I asked. My mind immediately scrolling through worst-case scenarios. A fall, a stroke, a scandal. Should I call Dad? No, she snapped, the sharpness startling me. Tell no one. Especially not your mother. Just be there, Meredith. Please. She hung up before I could ask why, leaving me with nothing but the dial tone and a sudden vibrating anxiety. Grandma Constance was the only person in the family who looked me in the eye when she spoke to me, but she was also a Prescott. She didn't do drama without a reason. I had time before work to drop off the rent check and pick up the birthday card Grandma had mentioned she left at the main house for me last week. It was a detour I usually avoided, but the cryptic phone call had unsettled me. I needed to see the house to see if the ground was shifting there too. The driveway of the Prescott estate was lined with manicured oaks that cast long, accusing shadows across the gravel. I parked my sensible sedan between a Range Rover and a Mercedes convertible that belonged to one of my mother's charity committee members. The house was awake. I could hear the murmur of voices from the sunroom as I let myself in through the side entrance. I moved quietly. Invisibility was a skill I had honed over 4 decades, a survival mechanism that allowed me to exist in this house without triggering my mother's critical gaze. I walked into the formal living room intending to grab the card from the mantel and leave, but something stopped me. Grandma's old leather photo album was sitting on the coffee table. It was a heavy-bound thing smelling of cedar and thyme. Mom usually kept it locked in the library, claiming the humidity ruined the prints. I walked over and opened it. The first few pages were the early years of my parents' marriage, stiff poses, polite smiles. Then came the year I was born. I turned the page. A jagged strip of paper was all that remained. I frowned and turned another page. Another tear. Someone had ripped photographs out of the binding with frantic, careless force. I ran my finger along the rough edge where a photo used to be. I found one blurry picture of me as an infant, swaddled so tightly only my eyes were visible. Then I turned to the section labeled Tiffany. It was pristine. Dozens of pages perfectly preserved. Tiffany taking her first steps. Tiffany in a pageant dress. Tiffany on a pony. The disparity wasn't new, but the violence of the torn pages was. It felt fresh. Diane. Where is Tiffany? She promised to help with the silent auction items. The voice drifted from the sunroom. I looked up to see my mother standing in the doorway holding a crystal flute of mimosa. She was 62 and terrifyingly elegant, wearing a silk blouse that cost more than my car. She looked at me and for a second her face was blank as if she were trying to place a stranger. Meredith, she said, her tone dropping 20 degrees. We weren't expecting you. I stood up, closing the album. I just came to pick up something Grandma left for me. My mother sighed, a short, sharp exhale through her nose. Well, make it quick. The committee is discussing the gala and we don't need distractions. She turned to leave, dismissing me as easily as she would a caterer who had walked into the wrong room. Mom, I said. She paused, looking back over her shoulder, her eyebrows raised in impatient arches. It's my birthday. The silence that stretched between us was loud enough to rattle the china in the cabinet. She blinked once. Oh. Right. She didn't smile. She didn't step forward to hug me. She just adjusted the cuff of her silk blouse. Family dinner tonight, Grandma insisted. Don't be late, Meredith. We're using the good silver. She walked away before I could answer. I stood there for a moment, listening to the chorus of laughter erupt from the sunroom, knowing not a single person in there knew I existed. I drove to work with the radio off. The silence felt safer than music. My office at the logistics firm was a sanctuary of order. Here I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the supply chain manager. I was the person who knew where every container was between Shanghai and Los Angeles. I walked in at 9:15 and the difference was physical. My shoulders dropped 2 inches. Happy birthday. Mere Sarah from accounting waved a bagel at me. We put a cupcake on your desk. Chocolate, obviously. Thanks, Sarah, I said, and my voice sounded different here, stronger, deeper. I sat at my desk, surrounded by my color-coded filing system. I didn't just organize, I documented. I kept records of everything: emails, invoices, shipping, manifest discrepancies. It was a compulsion, maybe, but facts were the only things that didn't change their story later. I opened the bottom drawer to grab a fresh notepad for the meeting with Raymond, and my hand brushed against a small velvet box tucked in the back. It wasn't jewelry. It was my box of things I wasn't supposed to keep. I pulled it out. Inside lay a plastic hospital bracelet yellowed with age, the plastic cracked and brittle. I had found it in the trash when I was 7 years old. I remembered running to my mother, holding it up like a treasure. Look, Mommy, from when I was born. That's garbage, Meredith. She had said, her voice tight and strange. Throw it away. I hadn't thrown it away. I had fished it out of the bin and hidden it, a tiny piece of proof that I had started somewhere, even if I didn't know where I was going. I looked at the faded ink. It was too worn to read clearly without a magnifying glass, but I knew what it was. I slipped the bracelet into my purse. I didn't know why. It just felt like a day to keep my evidence close. I checked the time, 9:45. I grabbed my coat. Raymond Ashford's law office was on the 14th floor of a pre-war building downtown, the kind of place with heavy oak doors and carpets that swallowed the sound of footsteps. The receptionist nodded at me. They're waiting for you, Ms. Prescott. Grandma Constance was sitting in her wheelchair by the window, looking out at the city skyline. Raymond sat behind his massive desk, his silver hair perfectly combed, his hands folded over a thick file. Meredith, Constance said, turning her chair. Her eyes were bright, almost feverish. My brave girl. Sit down. I sat. The leather chair was cold. Why am I here? Grandma? Does Mom know your mother thinks I'm at my physical therapy appointment? Constance said, a mischievous glint in her eye that vanished as quickly as it appeared. We don't have much time. Raymond. Raymond cleared his throat and opened the file. He didn't look at me with the pity I usually saw in people's eyes when they realized who I was in the Prescott hierarchy. He looked at me with respect. Meredith Raymond, began his voice baritone and steady. As you know, your grandmother has been reviewing her estate planning. I nodded. I assumed I was getting a token sum, maybe enough to put a down payment on a condo so I could stop paying rent to my father. Constance Prescott owns 100% of Prescott's Table. Raymond continued. All 12 restaurant locations. The real estate portfolio, the licensing rights, the liquid assets. I know, I said. Effective immediately upon her passing, the entire estate, valued as of this morning at $87.4 million, is to be transferred to a single beneficiary. I waited for him to say, Tiffany. It was always Tiffany. You, Meredith Raymond said. The air left the room. I stared at him. I stared at Grandma. What? Everything, Constance said, softly. Every fork, every brick, every dime. It's all yours, but… Tiffany, Mom and Dad… I stammered, my brain refusing to process the data. They get nothing, Constance said, her voice hardening into steel. Not a cent. My hands started to shake. Mom will kill me. She will actually kill me. Grandma, you can't do this. They'll contest it. They'll say you're… senile. Constance let out a dry laugh. Let them try. Raymond has video evaluations of my mental state from 3 different psychiatrists recorded over the last month. The will is ironclad. Why, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why me? Because you're the only one who ever earned it, she said. But that's not the only reason. She leaned forward, her frail hand gripping the armrest of her chair. There is a condition, Meredith. I knew it. There was always a catch. I braced myself. Tonight at dinner, Constance said, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that terrified me. We are going to announce the will. And when your mother starts screaming and she will scream, I am going to tell you the second surprise. The second surprise. It's something your mother has hidden for 39 years, Constance whispered. Something that started in a hospital room the night you were born. I felt the weight of the plastic bracelet in my purse, heavy as a stone. What is it? I asked. Constance leaned back, and for the first time I saw deep, ancient sorrow in her face. You'll find out at dinner, she said. But you need to be ready, Meredith. Because once I say it, there is no going back. Tonight, the family you think you know ceases to exist. I arrived at the estate precisely at 6:45. The gravel crunched under my tires, sounding louder than usual in the heavy evening air. I parked in my usual spot, far enough from the entrance to not block anyone important, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked the same as I had that morning, but I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. The secret I was carrying from Raymond's office sat in my stomach like lead. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and expensive candle wax. The dining room was already staged for a performance. My mother had ordered the staff to set the table with the Grandaunt's Limoges china, the delicate porcelain with the gold rim that we hadn't used since my father's 60th birthday. Crystal goblets shimmered under the chandelier light, waiting to be filled. It was a tableau of perfect family unity, brittle enough to shatter with a single wrong word. My father, Howard, was already there. He stood by the sideboard, pouring himself a glass of Cabernet. His hand trembled just slightly as the bottle neck clicked against the crystal rim. He didn't look up when I entered. Hi, Dad, I said. He flinched. Meredith. Good. You're on time. Your mother is… she's in a mood. Just try to keep your head down tonight. I wanted to laugh. Keeping my head down was my life's work, and look where it had gotten me. I watched him take a long swallow of wine, his eyes darting toward the hallway, as if checking for an ambush. He looked tired, the skin around his jaw slack and gray. Tiffany breezed in a moment later, thumbs flying across her phone screen. She didn't look up. Happy birthday, Mare, she said to the floor, walking past me to her seat at the center of the table. Diane made her entrance last. She swept into the room wearing a black dress that looked severe and architectural, her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde perfection. She scanned the table, checking the alignment of the silverware before her gaze landed on me. Sit down, Meredith, she said. Don't hover. It makes the room feel small. We took our places. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the scrape of silver against porcelain. The staff served the roast in hushed efficiency and disappeared. My mother orchestrated the conversation like a conductor, asking Tiffany questions about her upcoming trip to Cabo and talking over my father whenever he tried to speak about the golf course. At the head of the table, Grandma Constance sat in her wheelchair. She hadn't touched her food. She was watching Diane with the predatory focus of a hawk circling a field mouse. Mother, you're not eating, Diane said, slicing her meat with surgical precision. Is something wrong with the roast? Constance set her fork down. The metal clinked against the china, a sharp, deliberate sound that stopped all other movement at the table. I am not hungry, Constance said, and we are not here to discuss the roast. Diane sighed, dropping her knife. Oh, please. If this is about the guest list for the gala, I already told you it is not about the gala. Constance cut in. Her voice was stronger now, projecting from her diaphragm the way she must have done 40 years ago when she ran the boardroom. I have made some decisions regarding my estate. The air in the room changed instantly. It grew thin and sharp. My father reached for his wineglass again. Tiffany finally put her phone down. I met with Raymond Ashford this morning, Constance continued. I have executed a new will. Diane let out a short, dismissive laugh. Mother, really, we have discussed this. The trust is already set up to divide the assets between the girls once Howard and I are gone. There is no need for drama. There is no trust, Constance said. Not anymore. I dissolved it. Diane froze. Her eyes narrowed. You can't simply dissolve it. That requires... It required my signature, which I gave. Constance turned her head, slowly looking at each of us in turn before her gaze settled on me. I have left everything to Meredith. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen down the hall. Diane blinked. Excuse me? Use your hearing, Diane. Prescott's table. The 12 locations, the licensing rights, the real estate portfolio, the liquid assets, everything. It all goes to Meredith, solely to Meredith. That's $87 million. Diane whispered the number, slipping out before she could stop it. 87.4, actually, Constance corrected calmly. It was a good year. Tiffany looked between them, her brow furrowed. Wait, what about me? You have a trust fund from your grandfather, Constance said. It is more than enough for anyone to live on comfortably. But the empire, the legacy that belongs to Meredith. This is ridiculous, Diane hissed. She stood up her chair, screeching against the hardwood floor. Mother, you are clearly not in your right mind. I will have this contested by morning. Undue influence. Diminished capacity. We will have you evaluated. Try it, Constance said. Raymond has documented everything, including my psychiatric evaluation from last week. I am sound of mind, Diane. I am just finally sound of conscience. Diane turned to me. The mask of the composed matriarch fell away, revealing something ugly and terrified underneath. You, she spat. You did this. You manipulated her. You've been whispering in her ear, playing the victim. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. Don't lie to me. Diane slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal jump. You've always been jealous of Tiffany, jealous of this family. You've never fit in and you know it. You slink around in the shadows judging us taking our charity. I never fit in because you made sure I didn't, I said. Diane's eyes widened. It was the first time in 39 years I had ever spoken back to her at this table. Excuse me, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had criticized my posture, my hair, my career, and my laugh every day of my life. I realized suddenly that she didn't hate me because I was flawed. She hated me because I was there. I said you made sure I didn't fit in, I repeated. You cropped me out of the photos, Mom, literally and figuratively. Diane's face went white, then red. Fine. If you want to be the heiress so badly, you can start by paying market rate for your life. That apartment you rent from the company, the lease is terminated, tonight. Pack your things and get out of my family's property, Diane Howard said weakly. Maybe we should— Shut up, Howard, she screamed, spinning on him. You are useless, absolutely useless. Dad shrank back into his chair, staring at his wineglass. Enabler to the end. Mom, what is happening? Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. Why are you so scared? I'm not scared, Diane snapped, but her hand was shaking as she pointed a finger at me. I want her gone. Now. Are you finished, Diane? Constance asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that cut through Diane's hysteria. Diane panted, gripping the edge of the table. We are done here. I don't think so, Constance said. Because I believe I mentioned there was a second surprise. Diane froze. Her eyes darted to Constance's face, searching for something calculating the threat level. Sit down, Diane, Constance commanded. Diane didn't sit, but she stopped moving. Constance reached into the folder on her lap and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She placed it on the white tablecloth. It looked like a bomb. 39 years ago, something happened at St. Catherine's Hospital, Constance said. Something only a few people in this room know about. She looked at my father. Howard went pale, his face draining of color until he looked like wet clay. He squeezed his eyes shut. "Stop," Howard whispered. "Please, Connie, don't." Diane stared at the envelope. She stopped breathing. I saw a flicker in her eyes that I had never seen before. It wasn't just fear. It was the look of an animal caught in a trap realizing the hunter has arrived. "Diane, would you like to tell everyone?" Constance asked pleasantly. "Or shall I?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Diane said. Her voice was flat, mechanical. "Yes, you do," Constance said. "You have known for 39 years. The question isn't whether you know. The question is who in this family is really a Prescott." Tiffany laughed a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Grandma, what does that mean?" "Of course we're Prescotts." Constance looked at Tiffany with a softness that broke my heart. Then she looked at me. "I am saying," Constance said, measuring every syllable, "that neither of my son's daughters is actually his biological child." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. "What?" I whispered. "Diane, stop her!" Tiffany cried out, looking at her mother. "Tell her she's crazy." Diane didn't move. She was staring at the envelope as if it were radioactive. "The woman who gave birth to Meredith was named Patricia Prentice," Constance said. "She was a single mother in the room next to yours, Diane. She died 3 days after giving birth due to complications. Patricia, my middle name, the name Diane had given me. A sick joke or a guilty conscience." "You were alone in the hospital." Constance continued looking at me. And Diane saw an opportunity. Her own baby wasn't perfect enough. Diane made a noise in her throat, a strangled sound of rage. "Perfect enough?" I asked. "She had a cleft lip," Constance said. "A small, correctable birth defect." But Diane couldn't bear the thought of bringing home a child who wasn't flawless, so she made a trade. She paid a nurse named Margaret Holloway $50,000 to swap the bracelets. Diane lunged for the envelope. "That is a lie." Constance slammed her hand down on top of it. "It is in the nurse's diary, Diane. I have the DNA tests." Diane recoiled, breathing hard. "So, I'm not—" I looked at my father. "You knew." He wouldn't look at me. He just wept silent tears tracking through the broken veins on his cheeks. "And Tiffany?" I asked, my voice numb. "If Diane sent her real baby away, is Tiffany the real daughter?" Constance shook her head slowly. "No," she said. 15 years later, Diane wanted a do-over. She wanted a golden child to replace the disappointment she felt with you. But she couldn't get pregnant. So she faked it. Tiffany stood up, knocking her chair over. "That isn't true, Mom." And when the time came, Constance said, relentless, she went to a different hospital. She found a teenage mother named Cross who was giving her baby up for adoption. And she took that baby too. Constance looked at both of us, her gaze heavy with 10 years of silence. "Diane Prescott has 2 biological daughters," she said, "but neither of them is in this room. One was thrown away into the foster system because she had a scar on her lip. And the 2 of you are simply the stolen props she used to play house." The silence in my car after leaving the estate was heavy enough to choke on. I drove without knowing where I was going, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of old bone. The speedometer crept up 60, 70, 80 until the vibration of the engine rattled my teeth and forced me to slow down. I couldn't go home. I didn't have a home anymore. Diane had evicted me between the salad and the main course. I ended up back at Raymond Ashford's office. The building was dark, but the lights were on in the corner suite on the 14th floor. When I walked in, Grandma Constance was still there, a blanket draped over her legs, sipping tea with a hand that shook slightly. Raymond was pacing his tie undone, looking less like a corporate attorney and more like a general surveying a battlefield. "You came," Constance said softly. I stood in the doorway, feeling the phantom weight of that envelope on the dining table. "Is it true?" I asked. "I need to know, Grandma. Is it actually true, or was that just—" "Theater," Constance set her cup down. "I have known for 10 years, Meredith. I hired a private investigator the day I saw the results of a genealogy test I took for fun. The DNA didn't match. I wasn't related to you. I walked to the nearest chair and collapsed. 10 years. I had to wait, she said, her voice fierce. I had to wait until you were strong enough, and I had to wait until I had enough evidence to bury her. If I had spoken sooner, she would have cut me off from you. She would have destroyed the evidence. I played the long game. Raymond stopped pacing and leaned against his mahogany desk. He looked at me with a gravity that made my stomach turn. Meredith, before we open these files, you need to understand something. Once you see what is in here, you cannot unsee it. This isn't just about inheritance anymore. This is criminal fraud. Kidnapping technically. Kidnapping, I repeated. The word tasted like copper. Are you sure you want to know? Constance asked. I thought about the 39 years of feeling like a puzzle piece jammed into the wrong spot. I thought about the way Diane looked at me like a stain on her carpet. I've spent my whole life not knowing, I said. Open the files. For the next week, I lived in a residence inn 2 blocks from Raymond's office and spent my days inside his conference room, which we had converted into a war room. My organizational skills, the ones Diane mocked as tedious, finally had a purpose. I built a timeline on the whiteboard. I color-coded the players. Raymond worked beside me, ordering takeout and answering my endless questions. One night around 2 a.m, while we were sorting through hospital billing records from the 80s, I caught him rubbing his eyes. Why are you doing this? I asked. You're a partner at the biggest firm in the city. You don't need this headache. Raymond looked at me, and his professional mask slipped. My father's business partner embezzled everything we had when I was 20. My parents didn't want to make a fuss. They wanted to keep the peace. They lost their house, their retirement, everything because they were too polite to call a thief a thief. He tapped a finger on the stack of documents. I don't like thieves, Meredith, and I don't like bullies. Your mother is both. I looked back at the whiteboard. The evidence was compelling, but it was all circumstantial. We had the nurse's name, Margaret Holloway. We had records of large cash withdrawals from Diane's account around the time of my birth. We had the DNA test Constance had secretly run on hair from my brush years ago. But doubt is a parasite. It eats you from the inside. Diane had launched her counter-offensive. My phone was a minefield of texts from her society friends. Your poor mother is devastated. How could you do this to her? I heard you're having a breakdown. Dear, please get help. She was spinning the narrative. I was the unstable, greedy daughter attacking the family matriarch. I needed to hear it from him. I dialed my father's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice hushed. Meredith, you shouldn't be calling. Dad, I said, gripping the phone. Did you know? Just tell me. There was a long silence on the line. I heard the click of a lighter. He was smoking again. It's complicated, Mir. It's not complicated, I yelled, startling Raymond across the room. It's binary. Did you know I wasn't yours? I found out later, he whispered. 5 years later. The nurse. She came back. She wanted more money, and you paid her. I wanted peace, Meredith. If it got out, the scandal, Diane would have fallen apart. We were a family. You were my daughter in every way that mattered. But I wasn't, I said, tears finally spilling over. If I was your daughter in every way that mattered, you wouldn't have let her treat me like a servant in my own house. You wouldn't have let her erase me. I hung up. He hadn't denied it. He had known. For 34 years he had watched me try to win her love, knowing it was a rigged game. I need air, I told Raymond. I took a cab to Grandma Constance's private apartment in the city. It was a small place compared to the estate filled with books and the smell of lavender. She was waiting for me. Come here, she said, gesturing to the velvet sofa. I have something to show you. She pulled out the leather photo album, the same one I had seen at the main house, the one with the torn pages. But this one was intact. I saved the pages, she said. I took them out years ago before Diane could burn them. She opened the album to the year of my birth. There were no pictures of Diane holding me. Instead, there was a Polaroid of a woman in a hospital gown, her hair dark and matted with sweat, holding a bundle. She looked exhausted, pale, but her smile was radiant. Who is she? I asked, my voice trembling. Patricia Prentice, Constance said. Your mother. I traced the face of the stranger who looked so much like me. I had her chin. I had her eyes. She was in the room next to Diane. Constance explained. She was alone. No husband, no family. She died of an embolism 3 days after this picture was taken. You were an orphan, Meredith. A ward of the state waiting to happen. So Diane saved me. I asked, a desperate hope flaring up. Maybe it was an act of mercy. Constance closed the book. Number. Diane didn't take you because she wanted to save you. She took you because she had discarded her own. She discarded her own. The words hung in the air. Diane's baby, my biological grandchild, was born with a cleft lip, Constance said. It was mild. A simple surgery would have fixed it. But Diane! She is obsessed with image. She saw imperfection and she rejected it. She swapped the babies. She sent her own flesh and blood into the foster system under a fake name so she could bring home the pretty baby from next door. I felt sick. Physically sick. I wasn't chosen. I was stolen. And somewhere out there, another woman had been thrown away like garbage because she wasn't perfect enough for Diane Prescott. I went back to Raymond's office in a daze. I sat at the conference table staring at the timeline. Something was nagging at me. A loose thread. I opened my purse to find a tissue, and my fingers brushed against plastic. The hospital bracelet. The one I had found in the trash when I was 7. The one I had grabbed from my desk drawer on my birthday. I pulled it out and held it under the halogen lamp. The plastic was yellow and cracked, but the typed insert was still legible if you squinted. Baby girl Prentice. I stared at it. Prentice. Not Prescott. This was it. Physical proof. I had been carrying the evidence of my own kidnapping since I was 7 years old. Raymond, I said. Look at this. He came over, adjusting his glasses. Prentice. That matches the nurse's diary. That matches the death certificate for Patricia Prentice. This is admissible Meredith. This is the smoking gun. But my mind was racing ahead, connecting dots that made my blood run cold. Raymond, I said slowly, if Diane's biological baby went to foster care, and I am Patricia Prentice's baby, I looked at the DNA results on the table. The ones for Tiffany. Constance said Diane did it twice, I whispered. Raymond pulled up Tiffany's file. 0% DNA matched to the Prescotts. 15 years later, I said, thinking of the timeline. I was a disappointment. I wasn't the social butterfly Diane wanted. She wanted a do-over. But she couldn't get pregnant. She faked it, Raymond said. She stole Tiffany too, I said, the horror of it expanding in my chest. From a different hospital. A different mother. Raymond tapped the file. A teenage mother named Cross. We tracked the records. A baby girl born to a 16-year-old supposed to be adopted by a family in Ohio. The baby disappeared from the record. Tiffany isn't my sister, I realized. She's just another victim. The realization hit me harder than the loss of the money. Tiffany, the golden child, the princess in the tower, she was just a prop. Diane had built a family out of theft and lies, curating children like she curated furniture. Where is Diane's real daughter? I asked. The one she threw away. Raymond hesitated. He looked at Constance's notes. Her name is Gemma, he said. Gemma Hayes. She kept the last name of the family she was placed with briefly. Gemma Hayes, I repeated. The name felt heavy. She lives in Columbus, Raymond said. She's a nurse. Constance has been keeping tabs on her, anonymously. Does she know? I asked. No, Raymond said. She thinks she was abandoned at birth. She has no idea she is the heir to the Prescott fortune. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger. We need to find her, I said. Meredith, Raymond warned. If we bring her into this, it gets messy. It's already messy, I said, turning back to him. Diane stole my life. She stole Tiffany's life. And she threw Gemma's life in the trash. I don't want the money, Raymond. I don't care about the restaurants or the estate. I picked up the hospital bracelet and closed my fist around it. I want her to face us. All three of us. For the next 48 hours, Raymond Ashford's conference room became my entire world. I stopped thinking like a daughter and started thinking like a supply chain manager. I treated the wreckage of my life as a logistics problem. I turned the whiteboard into a master timeline color-coding every event with sticky notes. Blue for medical records, red for bank withdrawals, green for the undeniable gaps where the truth had been erased. "You are terrifyingly good at this," Raymond said, watching me cross-reference a hospital billing code with a canceled check from my father's 1985 ledger. I capped my marker. "I spent 20 years tracking shipping containers across 3 oceans, Raymond. Finding a paper trail in my own family is just a matter of knowing where the bodies are buried. We had the documents, but paper is silent. We needed a voice." Raymond had located Bethany Holloway, the daughter of the nurse named in Constance's notes. Margaret Holloway had died 15 years ago, but she had left something behind. Bethany agreed to meet us at a diner in Jersey City, a neutral ground far enough from the Prescott sphere of influence. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and maple syrup. Bethany was sitting in a corner booth shredding a paper napkin into tiny, nervous confetti. She was 63, wearing a sensible raincoat and clutching a handbag as if someone might snatch it. "Ms. Holloway?" I asked, sliding into the booth opposite her. She looked at me, and her eyes widened. "You look just like the photo in my mother's journal. Not the baby photo. The photo of the other woman. Patricia," I said. "My mother." Bethany nodded, her hands still shaking. "My mother never forgave herself, you know. She took that money because my dad was sick and we were drowning in medical bills. $50,000 was a fortune then. But it ate her alive." "Tell me what happened," I said gently. I didn't need her guilt. I needed her testimony. Bethany opened her bag and pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten journal page. She slid it across the Formica table. It was the night shift, Bethany said, her voice dropping to a whisper. 3 babies in the ward. The Prescott baby, Diane's real daughter, was born healthy, 10 fingers, 10 toes, but she had a cleft lip. I stared at her. A cleft lip. "It was mild," Bethany said, "completely correctable with surgery. The doctors told Mrs. Prescott it would leave a faint scar, maybe nothing at all by the time the child was 10. But your mother, she wouldn't hear it. She wouldn't hear it. She called it a defect," Bethany said. "She told my mother she couldn't bring home a broken child. She said the Prescotts didn't have imperfections. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Diane hadn't swapped babies because of a terminal illness or a genetic tragedy. She had thrown away her own flesh and blood because of a cosmetic flaw, because a tiny scar would have ruined her perfect family photos. So she chose me," I said, my voice hollow. "You were in the next bassinet," Bethany said. "Perfect. Symmetrical. Alone. Your mother had just passed. Mrs. Prescott saw an opportunity. She paid my mother to switch the bracelets and the charts. She sent her own baby into the system under a Jane Doe alias, and she took you home. And the 3rd baby I asked, thinking of Tiffany." Bethany shook her head. "That was later. My mom wasn't involved in the 2nd time, but she heard rumors. Mrs. Prescott came back 15 years later looking for another upgrade." I thanked Bethany and took the journal pages. As I walked out into the gray afternoon, I felt a strange new emotion. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was disgust. Pure, unadulterated revulsion for the woman I had spent 39 years trying to please. I drove back to the Residence Inn where I was staying. I was exhausted, my head throbbing with the fluorescent lights of the diner. I swiped my keycard, pushed open the door to room 314, and froze. Diane Prescott was sitting in the armchair by the window. She looked perfectly composed, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded in her lap. She hadn't broken in. She was simply Diane Prescott. Doors opened for her. "We need to talk," she said. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't step back. "How did you get in here? Don't be tedious, Meredith. I am a donor to the hotel's parent company." She stood up and walked toward me. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was just finally standing up straight. "I don't know what lies your grandmother has been feeding you," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "But this ends now. You are embarrassing yourself. You are embarrassing the family." I closed the door behind me. "I know about St. Catherine's Diane. I know about both swaps. Her face didn't change, but her pupils contracted. A micro-expression of fear. You are delusional, she said. You are having a mental break. It happens to women your age who aren't settled. I walked past her to the mini fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. I wasn't going to offer her anything. I spoke to Bethany Holloway today, I said. I have Margaret's diary. I know why you gave her away. Because she wasn't perfect. Because of a lip scar. Diane flinched. It was violent and involuntary, a crack in the porcelain. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. I turned to face her. I know you paid $50,000 to buy a baby because you were too vain to love your own. And I know you did it again 15 years later with Tiffany because I turned out to be too quiet, too introverted, too much of a disappointment. Diane stepped closer, invading my personal space. The scent of her Chanel No. 5, usually comforting now, smelled like formaldehyde. Let's be practical, she said, her tone shifting from attack to negotiation. The inheritance? Keep it. Run the restaurants. I won't contest the will. I stared at her. You're bribing me. I am offering you what you want, she said. You want the money. Take it. You want the power. It's yours. Just stop digging. Stop asking questions. Burn those diary pages. She reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was cold. We can go back to normal, Meredith. You can be the heir. Isn't that what you always wanted? To be seen. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. For decades, I would have killed for this touch, for this acknowledgement. Now it felt like a shackle. What about Gemma? I asked. Diane froze. Her hand dropped from my arm. Who, your daughter? I said. Your real daughter. The one you threw away. I don't know anyone by that name, she said, but her voice wavered. She took a step back. I think you do, I said, stepping toward her. I think you have thought about her every day for 39 years. I think every time you looked at me, you saw the crime you committed. That's why you hate me, isn't it? Not because I'm not yours, but because I'm the evidence. Get out of my way, Diane said. She grabbed her purse and pushed past me to the door. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't need to. Her retreat was an admission of guilt louder than any confession. I went back to Raymond's office the next morning with the taste of victory in my mouth, but Raymond was the one who hesitated. He sat at the conference table rubbing his temples. Meredith. We need to be careful, he said. Careful. She offered me the empire to shut up Raymond. That is a confession. It is inadmissible hearsay, he corrected. In a court of law, she will deny it. She will say she was trying to calm a disturbed daughter, and her lawyers will spin a different story. What story? I asked. Raymond opened a file folder. The affair theory. I blinked. The what? Think about it. Raymond said. What if Howard isn't just an enabler? What if he is your biological father? What if he had an affair with Patricia Prentice? I sat down slowly. An affair. It would explain why Diane hates you, Raymond said. You would be the living proof of his infidelity. It would explain why she kept you but treated you like garbage. And it would explain why Howard stayed silent. He wasn't just protecting Diane, he was protecting himself. I felt the ground shift again. Could it be true? It made a twisted sort of sense. Maybe I wasn't a stranger. Maybe I was the bastard child, the result of a sin my father committed. If that's true, I said then, I really am a Prescott. And half this case falls apart. We need definitive proof, Raymond said. Grandma's DNA test was from hair samples. It is good, but it can be challenged. We need a medical grade test. We need to compare your DNA against a known sample from Patricia Prentice's family. Do we have that? Constance is thorough, Raymond said. She obtained medical samples from Patricia's estranged sister years ago under the guise of a genealogy project. We also have a sample from Howard. Run it, I said. I need to know. The wait for the lab results was excruciating. It took 48 hours, during which I paced the floor of my hotel room until I had memorized the pattern of the carpet. I replayed every interaction I ever had with my father. His avoidance, his guilty looks. Was it shame for letting his wife buy a baby, or shame for fathering one with another woman? When the call came, Raymond didn't sound triumphant. He sounded solemn. Come to the office, Meredith. The results are in. I walked into the office 10 minutes later. The file was closed on the desk. Tell me, I said. Raymond opened the folder. Subject Meredith Prescott, he read. Comparison to subject Howard Prescott. Probability of paternity. 0%. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. So, no affair. No affair, Raymond confirmed. You are not Howard's daughter. He turned the page. Comparison to subject Patricia Prentice. Probability of maternity. 99.9%. You are Patricia's daughter Meredith. You are 100% Prentice. There is not a drop of Prescott blood in your veins. It hurt. Even though I expected it, it hurt to have it confirmed in black and white ink. I was a stranger who had walked into a play and forgotten to leave the stage. So, Grandma, Constance, she really loves me just because she chose to. I asked, my voice catching. She loves you because you are... you, Raymond said gently. That is the point, Meredith. Blood is biology. Family is behavior. He picked up a second file. But there is one more result, he said. Gemma, I asked. Raymond nodded. We ran the sample Constance obtained from Gemma Hayes. Comparison to Constance Prescott. 25% match. Consistent with a grandmother and granddaughter relationship. She is theirs, I whispered. She is the real Prescott. She is Howard and Diane's biological child, Raymond said. The one born with the cleft lip. The one sent to foster care. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a printout of an email. Constance reached out to her, Raymond said. Through a proxy, she told Gemma there might be answers about her birth family. Gemma wants to meet. To meet who, Constance? You, Raymond said. She wants to meet you. I looked at the paper. A name, a phone number, and a location in Columbus, Ohio. She's waiting, Raymond said. I picked up the paper. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I had spent my life wondering why I didn't fit into the Prescott shape. Now I knew. I wasn't a broken piece. I was just part of a different puzzle. Book the flight, I told Raymond. I'm going to meet my sister. The flight to Columbus was a blur of cloud cover and turbulence, but my hands were steady. I rented a car at the airport, a compact sedan that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner, and drove to the address Raymond had given me. It wasn't a house. It was a coffee shop in a brick building called The Grind, tucked into a neighborhood of porch swings and peeling paint. I sat at a corner table with a cold brew I didn't drink, watching the door. Every time the bell chimed, my stomach twisted. I had spent 39 years thinking I was an only child, then 24 years thinking I was a big sister to a princess. Now I was waiting for a ghost. When she walked in, I knew her instantly. It wasn't because she looked like me. She didn't. She looked like Howard Prescott. She had his square jaw, his height, and the exact shade of hazel eyes that stared back at me from the portrait in my father's study. She was wearing scrubs, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, looking tired in the way that settles into your bones. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. Gemma. She stopped. She looked at me, scanning my face with a nurse's triage gaze, efficient, assessing, guarded. You're Meredith. I nodded. She walked over and sat down, placing a canvas tote bag on the floor. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. She just looked at me. And that was when I saw it. A faint white line running from her lip to her nose. It was barely there. A whisper of a scar. A surgeon had stitched it with incredible skill, leaving behind a mark you would have to be looking for to see. But I was looking. I was staring at the reason Diane Prescott had abandoned her own flesh and blood. That tiny white line was the price of admission to the Prescott family, and Gemma hadn't made the cut. I'm sorry, I said. It was a stupid thing to say, but it was the only thing in my head. Gemma shrugged. She signaled a waiter and ordered a black coffee. Constance told me everything she said. Her voice was deeper than mine, rougher. She told me about the swap, about the money, about you. I don't know what to say, I admitted. I feel like I stole your life. Gemma laughed, a sharp, barking sound. You didn't steal anything. You survived it. From what Constance says, growing up in that house wasn't exactly a picnic. It wasn't, I said. I was the placeholder. The disappointment. And I was the reject, Gemma said. She took a sip of her coffee. I grew up in 3 different foster homes before I aged out. I put myself through nursing school working double shifts at a diner. I have 0 student debt and I own my condo. It's small, but it's mine. She leaned forward, her hazel eyes locking onto mine. I heard you're the heir now, she said. $87 million. It should be yours, I said. You're the blood relative. You're the Prescott. I don't want their money, Gemma said. I don't want anything from a woman who looked at a baby and saw a defect. She traced the rim of her cup. But I do want to see her face, she added softly. I want to stand in front of her and let her see exactly what she threw away. I want to know if she has a soul or if it's just empty space in there. We formed our alliance over cold coffee and stale muffins, 2 women who should have been strangers bound together by the same crime. When we left the cafe, I didn't feel alone anymore. I had an army of one. We flew back to the city the next morning. The war room at Raymond's office felt different now. It crackled with energy. We had the documents, we had the witness testimony, and now we had the living proof. Raymond laid the plan out on the table like a general. The Prescott Foundation Gala is in 2 weeks, he said. It is the highlight of the social season. The governor will be there, the press will be there. Diane will be in her element. It's perfect, I said. We hit her when she's on stage. We make it public. She can't spin it if everyone sees the evidence at once. Raymond nodded, but his eyes were serious. This is the nuclear option, Meredith. Once we do this, there is no going back. The fallout will destroy the family reputation permanently. The reputation is a lie, Gemma said from the corner. She was looking at a photo of Diane on the wall, her expression unreadable. Let it burn. Constance was on speakerphone from her physical therapy center. Her voice was weak, but clear. Be careful, my girls. A cornered rat bites. Diane has been quiet for 3 days. That is not peace. That is preparation. I looked at the stack of evidence. The DNA tests. The diary. The hospital records. We have her grandma. She can't fight math. She can't fight biology. Don't underestimate her need for survival, Constance warned. But give her hell. There was one loose end. One person who deserved to know the truth before the world did. I'm going to see Tiffany, I said. Gemma looked at me. The princess. Why, she's the golden child. She won't believe you. She's a victim too, I said. She was stolen just like I was. She deserves a chance to stand on the right side of this. I drove to Tiffany's penthouse in the city center. The building was glass and steel screaming money. My parents paid the mortgage, the HOA fees, and the doorman's Christmas bonus. Tiffany answered the door wearing yoga pants and holding a green juice. She looked annoyed to see me. Mom says you've gone crazy, she said, not stepping back to let me in. She says you're trying to destroy the family because you're jealous of the inheritance. I pushed past her. We need to talk, Tiff. I walked into her living room, which was decorated in shades of cream and beige, perfectly mimicking Diane's aesthetic. I sat on the white sofa and pulled the file from my bag. Mom is lying to you, I said. She has been lying to you since the day you were born. Tiffany rolled her eyes and remained standing arms crossed. Oh my God, Meredith. Save the drama for your therapist. I'm busy. You're not a Prescott, I said. That stopped her. She froze the green juice halfway to her mouth. Excuse me. I opened the file. I laid out the birth certificate we had tracked down. The hospital admission records for a 16-year-old girl named Sarah Cross. The timeline gaps. You were born in Ohio, I said. Your mother was a teenager. She gave you up for adoption, but you never made it to the agency. Diane found you. She arranged a private transfer that wasn't legal. She pretended she was pregnant, wore the pads, staged the baby shower, and then brought you home. Tiffany stared at the papers. Her face twisted. This is fake. You typed this up. I have the DNA results, I said, pointing to the chart. 0% match to Dad. 0% match to Mom. Stop it! Tiffany screamed. She threw the file onto the floor. Papers skidded across the hardwood. You are sick. You are actually sick. Mom loves me. She has always loved me. She loves you because she chose you. I yelled back, standing up. She picked you out like a handbag, Tiffany, because I wasn't good enough. Because her real daughter wasn't good enough. You are the replacement for the replacement. Tiffany's chest was heaving. Her eyes were wet, wild with panic. Get out! Get out of my house! I'm trying to save you, I said. When this comes out, and it will come out, you need to know who you are. I know who I am. I'm Tiffany Prescott, and I am calling Mom right now to tell her you are harassing me. She grabbed her phone and started dialing her fingers, shaking so hard she dropped it once before picking it up. Ask her about Gemma, I shouted as I walked to the door. Ask her about the daughter she threw away because of a scar. I slammed the door behind me, my heart racing. I had tried. I had planted the seed. But as I rode the elevator down, I felt a creeping dread. I hadn't saved Tiffany. I had just pulled the pin on a grenade and handed it to her. I went back to my hotel room. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me jittery and cold. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on. I waited for Tiffany to call back to ask questions to apologize. The phone didn't ring. The silence stretched for an hour, then 2. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't Tiffany. It was Raymond. Meredith, he said. His voice was tight. We have a problem. What happened? Did Tiffany call Diane? She did, Raymond said. And Diane didn't waste a second. She just filed an emergency restraining order against you. She claims you forced your way into Tiffany's home and threatened her with violence. She's lying, I said, standing up. I just showed her the papers. There's more, Raymond said. She filed a petition an hour ago to have Constance declared incompetent. She's claiming you are manipulating an elderly woman with dementia to alter her estate planning. She's asking for an emergency conservatorship. She can't do that. Grandma is sane. She can freeze everything while the court decides, Raymond said, and she's controlling the narrative. Turn on the news. Channel 4. I grabbed the remote and clicked the TV on. There was Diane. She was standing on the steps of the Prescott estate, dabbling at her eyes with a handkerchief. A cluster of microphones was thrust in her face. It is a tragedy, Diane was saying, her voice trembling perfectly. My eldest daughter has struggled with mental health issues for years. We tried to protect her privacy, but after she threatened her sister today, we have no choice but to seek help. We just want her to be safe. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Heiress Drama, Prescott daughter accused of assault. My mouth fell open. She had flipped it. She had taken the truth and inverted it until I was the villain and she was the grieving mother. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I stared at it. The dread in my stomach turned into ice. Hello, I answered. Miss Prescott. The voice was male authoritative. This is Detective Morrison with the Cleveland Police Department. We have received a complaint regarding a domestic disturbance at the residence of Tiffany Prescott. We also have allegations of elder abuse regarding Constance Prescott. I gripped the phone. That's not true. None of that is true. I need you to come down to the station, Miss Prescott, the detective said. We just want to ask you a few questions. I looked at the TV screen. Diane was still talking, looking brave and heartbroken. I looked at the file on the bed. The truth, the evidence, the reality. It didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, the truth hadn't even put its shoes on yet, and Diane's lie had already run a marathon. I'm coming, I whispered. I hung up. The victory I had felt in the war room, the certainty that justice was inevitable, dissolved like sugar in hot water. I wasn't the hunter anymore. I was the prey. The interrogation room at the 2nd District smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat in a metal chair that was bolted to the floor, my hands clasped so tightly on the table that my knuckles were white ridges. Raymond sat beside me, his briefcase open, his posture rigid. Across the table, Detective Morrison flipped through a file that was already terrifyingly thick. He looked tired, a man who had seen enough family disputes to know they were usually messier than street crime. Your mother states that you have a history of episodes, Ms. Prescott, Morrison said, not looking up. She claims you stopped taking your medication recently. I don't take medication, I said, my voice shaking. Because I don't have a condition. Raymond put a hand on my arm to silence me. Detective, my client has no history of psychiatric treatment. These are fabrications designed to discredit her in a pending estate dispute. Morrison looked up then. His eyes were flat, unimpressed. "We have a sworn statement from Tiffany Prescott that you forced your way into her home, screamed incoherently about stolen babies, and physically threatened her. We also have a statement from Diane Prescott, alleging that you have been isolating your grandmother, Constance Prescott, and coercing her to sign documents she doesn't understand." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a masterclass in distortion. Diane hadn't just lied. She had taken the truth and inverted it like a photo negative. I was the one investigating stolen babies. Constance was the one who initiated the will change. "This is Darvo," I whispered. "Deny attack, reverse victim and offender," Ms. Prescott Morrison asked. "My client denies all allegations," Raymond said smoothly. "We have documentation proving that Constance Prescott is of sound mind, including video evidence recorded last week. And the interaction with Tiffany Prescott was a conversation, not an assault." Morrison closed the file. "Look, folks, I'm not a probate judge, but when I get calls about elder abuse and domestic disturbances involving one of the biggest families in the city, I have to investigate. For now, Diane Prescott has been granted a temporary restraining order. You are to stay 500 yards away from her Tiffany Prescott and the Prescott estate." "What about my grandmother?" I asked. Morrison sighed. "Social Services is opening an inquiry into her care. Until that's resolved, access may be restricted." I walked out of the station feeling like I was moving through underwater currents. I had the truth. I had the evidence. But Diane had the story. We stepped out onto the sidewalk and the night exploded into white. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession, blinding me. A wall of reporters had gathered at the bottom of the precinct steps. Microphones were thrust toward us like spears. "Meredith. Is it true you attacked your sister? Are you contesting the will? Do you have a comment on your mother's statement about your mental health?" Raymond grabbed my elbow, steering me toward his waiting town car. "Don't look at them. Don't say a word." I ducked my head, shielding my eyes, but I saw the headlines in my mind already. Unstable heiress, family tragedy. Diane had weaponized the one thing she cared about most, her publicity. The back of the car was quiet, insulated from the chaos outside, but the silence screamed. I pulled my phone out. It was vibrating incessantly. Texts from numbers I hadn't heard from in years. People from the country club, my mother's charity board. "I can't believe you would do this to Diane, after everything she gave you. You need Jesus and a psychiatrist, Meredith." I scrolled through the hatred, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. This was what she did. She didn't just fight you, she erased you. She turned your entire world into a hostile witness. My phone rang again. The screen said Dad. I stared at it. Raymond watched me. "Answer it," he said softly. "Record it." I swiped the screen and put it on speaker. Dad Meredith, his voice was slurred. He had been drinking. "Meredith, you have to stop this. Stop what I asked. Stop telling the truth." "You're destroying us," he wept. "The news, the police. Diane is in a state. She's talking about checking into a clinic for exhaustion. Do you know what this does to our standing? To the business? I don't care about the business, Howard." I used his first name. It felt like cutting a cord. "I care about the fact that you lied to me for 39 years. "I didn't lie," he stammered. I didn't say anything. There's a difference." "No, there isn't," I said. "You knew I wasn't yours." "When did you know 5 years in?" he whispered. "That nurse, Holloway. She wrote to us. She wanted more money. Diane handled it. She told me everything." "And you stayed," I said. "You looked at me every morning across the breakfast table, knowing I was a stranger's child you bought to fix a cosmetic error, and you stayed." "I stayed for you," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You think you would have been better off in the system? You had a good life, Meredith. Private schools, cars, a trust fund. I gave you a father. You gave me a landlord," I said. "You gave me a roof over my head as long as I played the role of the invisible, grateful daughter." I took a breath. The question had been eating at me since I saw the files on Tiffany. "And Tiffany?" I asked. "Did you know about her too? Or did Diane lie to you about the pregnancy?" The line went silent. All I could hear was his heavy, wet breathing. "Dad, I helped her with the padding, he whispered. The car seemed to swerve, though Raymond was driving perfectly straight. What? She wasn't pregnant? He said, his voice flat with resignation. We couldn't. She wanted a fresh start. A baby that was actually ours in spirit, if not blood. But we couldn't adopt legally, not with the timeline she wanted. So she found the girl in Ohio. I drove the car Meredith. I drove Diane to pick up the baby. I closed my eyes. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a coward. He was an accomplice. You're not an enabler. Howard, I said. You're a co-conspirator. I hung up. I blocked the number. I felt lighter in a terrifying way, like an astronaut whose tether had just snapped. Raymond's phone rang. He answered it on the car's Bluetooth system. Ashford. There was a frantic voice on the other end. A nurse. Mr. Ashford, it's regarding Constance Prescott. You're listed as her medical proxy. What happened? Raymond asked, his hands tightening on the wheel. She collapsed 20 minutes ago, the nurse said. It looks like a stroke. The ambulance is taking her to St. Jude's. It's bad, sir. Drive, I said. The hospital waiting room was a purgatory of beige vinyl and fluorescent humming. I paced the length of the room, counting the tiles, 412 steps from the vending machine to the window. Diane had done this. The stress of the petition, the police inquiry at the care facility, it had been too much for an 84-year-old heart. Raymond came out of the ICU doors, his face grim. She's alive, he said. But it was a massive hemorrhagic stroke. She's paralyzed on the right side. Her speech is compromised. Can I see her briefly? She's asking for you. I walked into the room. The machines were loud, beeping, whooshing, clicking. Constance looked tiny in the bed, a bundle of bones and pale skin hooked up to tubes. Her face was slack on one side, pulling her mouth into a permanent frown. Grandma, I whispered. Her left eye opened. It found me. It was still sharp, still blue, still her. Her hand, the good one, twitched on the sheet. I took it. It was cold. Dith. The syllables were a struggle, forcing their way through a broken connection. I'm here, I said, tears dripping onto her knuckles. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have started this. She squeezed my hand, weakly but with intent. No. Up. Don't stop, I asked. La, she rasped. Ish. The gala. It was 3 days away. Both girls, she managed to say. Her eye drifted to the door, then back to me. Show. Them. Fam. Lie. The effort exhausted her. Her eyes closed and the monitor's rhythm slowed. The nurse touched my shoulder. You need to let her rest. I walked out of the ICU and kept walking. I didn't stop at the waiting room. I found the hospital chapel, a small, windowless room with abstract stained glass and rows of empty chairs. I sat in the back row and put my head in my hands. It was over. Diane had won. She had the restraining order. She had the public sympathy. She had neutralized Constance. I was alone. I was the crazy daughter who attacked her sister and gave her grandmother a stroke. I should just take the money, I thought. The bribe Diane offered. Take the restaurants, move to Europe, disappear. Let Tiffany live her lie. Let Gemma stay in Columbus. Why was I fighting for people who didn't even know they needed saving? The door creaked open. I didn't look up. I assumed it was a chaplain or a janitor. Footsteps approached, soft rubber soles on carpet. Someone sat down in the chair next to me. I looked up. It was Gemma. She was wearing her street-clothes jeans and a hoodie, but she still looked like a nurse. Calm in the face of blood. Raymond told me, she said. She's dying, I said, or close to it. She's tough, Gemma said. I checked her chart at the nurse's station. Don't tell anyone. HIPAA violation. She looked at the abstract glass. So, Gemma said, this is the part where you quit. I wiped my face. Look at the scoreboard, Gemma. She has the cops, the press, and the courts. I have a box of stolen papers and a grandmother who can't speak. If I keep going, she'll bury me. Gemma turned to me. The faint scar on her lip caught the dim light. "Do you know what it's like to grow up knowing you were thrown away?" she asked. I stayed silent. "I spent 18 years wondering what I did wrong," she said. "Was I too loud? Too quiet? Did I cry too much?" I audited my existence every single day, trying to find the flaw that made my mother leave me in a basket. She pointed to her lip. "Turns out it was this. A millimeter of skin." She leaned forward, her intensity radiating like heat. "You think you're losing Meredith, but you're looking at it wrong. You survived growing up in that house. I survived growing up with nothing. We are the two things Diane Prescott fears most. What's that, survivors?" Gemma said. "She thinks she can break you because she broke the others. She broke Howard. She broke Tiffany. But she didn't break me because she never kept me, and she didn't break you because you never let her in." She stood up. "The gala is in 72 hours. You can walk away. You can take the payout and let her win. Let her keep Tiffany as her pet. Let her keep her reputation." She offered a hand to me. "Or we can go to that party. We can stand on that stage. And we can show the world what a Prescott family reunion really looks like." I looked at her hand. It was rough, scrubbed raw from years of hospital soap. It was a worker's hand. I thought about Constance's whispered command. "Show them family." I wasn't a Prescott by blood. I wasn't a Prentice by memory. I was something new, something forged in the fire of Diane's ambition and cooled in the shadow of her neglect. I took Gemma's hand. I stood up. "Let's finish it," I said. I woke up with a crick in my neck and the taste of stale hospital coffee in my mouth. The morning light filtering through the blinds of Constance's room was gray and unforgiving, washing out the color of the sterile walls. My grandmother was asleep, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that was too shallow for my liking. But she was alive. I watched her for a long moment. For 39 years, I had defined myself by who I wasn't. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the beauty. I wasn't the biological daughter. I had spent 4 decades begging the universe to explain why I wasn't enough, hoping that if I just followed the rules and paid my rent on time, someone would finally hand me a certificate of existence. I stood up and stretched, feeling my spine pop. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. The woman who had driven to Columbus yesterday to meet a stranger was gone. The woman who had cowered in police stations was gone. I didn't need Diane to tell me I mattered anymore. I didn't need my father to defend me. I didn't even need the Prescott name. I turned back to the room. Gemma was asleep in the recliner, her arms crossed over her chest, looking like a soldier catching 10 minutes in a trench. I picked up my phone and dialed Raymond. "I'm going to the gala," I said when he answered. Meredith Raymond's voice was thick with sleep. "The restraining order. If you get within 500 yards of Diane, you will be arrested." "Let them arrest me," I said. "But not until I've said what I need to say. The Grand Hotel Ballroom is private property, but it's a public event. I bought a ticket 6 months ago under my own name. Technically, I'm a guest. Diane will have security remove you at the door." "No, she won't," I said, "because I'm bringing guests she can't throw out without causing the exact scene she's trying to avoid." "And Raymond? Bring the files. All of them." I hung up and touched Gemma's shoulder. She woke instantly, eyes clearing in a second. "We're doing it?" she asked. "We're doing it," I said. We set up our command center in my hotel suite. It was quieter than Raymond's office and felt less like a law firm and more like a bunker. Raymond arrived at noon with a banker's box that contained the ammunition for the night. He laid everything out on the duvet. "Here is the package," he said, handing me a slim leather portfolio. "Inside are certified copies of the DNA results from 3 independent labs, the affidavit from Bethany Holloway, photocopies of the hospital logs, and the deed to the trust property Diane sold to fund the first payoff." He paused, reaching into his briefcase to pull out a small black device. It looked like a fountain pen. "This is for you," he said. "A pen." "It's a high-fidelity recorder," Raymond said. "It captures audio from 30 feet away, even in a noisy room. In Ohio, only one party needs to consent to a recording. That party is you." I took the pen. It felt cool and heavy. "Why do I need this?" "We have the documents. Documents are dry." "Meredith, Juries get bored with paper. But a voice. A confession. That is visceral. Diane is going to panic. When she panics, she talks. If she admits to anything, the swap, the bribery, the fraud, I want it on tape. I clipped the pen to the neckline of my blouse. It was invisible. Gemma came out of the bathroom. She had showered and changed into a simple black dress we had bought at the mall an hour ago. It was understated, almost severe, but it made her look formidable. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, touching her face. "I've never worn anything this expensive," she said. "It costs less than one of Diane's scarves," I said. She turned to me. "What if she doesn't recognize me? It's been 39 years. I was 3 days old when she last saw me." "She'll recognize you," I said. "You have Howard's eyes, and you have the one thing she's spent 4 decades trying to forget." I pointed to the mirror, to the faint white line on her lip. "That isn't a scar, Gemma," I said. "It's a signature." A knock at the door made us all jump. Raymond moved to cover the documents, but I checked the peephole. It was a courier. I opened the door. He held a long garment bag with the Prescott Foundation logo on the zipper. "Delivery from St. Jude's Hospital," the courier said. "From a Mrs. Constance Prescott." I took the bag and hung it on the closet door. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was a gown of midnight blue silk vintage Valentino. It was the dress Constance had worn to her husband's inauguration as chairman of the board 30 years ago. It was armor. Pinned to the fabric was a note in shaky left-handed script: "Wear it well, make me proud." I ran my hand over the silk. I wasn't going as the invisible daughter tonight. I was going as the matriarch in waiting. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I expected it to be a reporter or maybe a flying monkey from Diane's charity circle. I looked at the screen. Tiffany. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over the decline button. She had filed a police report against me. She had called me crazy. "Answer it," Gemma said from the bed. I slid the icon to green and put it on speaker. "Hello, Tiffany." "Meredith." Her voice sounded small, tinny, stripped of its usual vocal fry. "I'm here," I said. "I went into Mom's office," Tiffany whispered. "After you left. I wanted to prove you wrong. I wanted to find my baby book and shove it in your face." I waited. The silence on the line was heavy with the sound of someone's world ending. "I found a box," she said. "It was taped under the bottom drawer of her desk. It had a hospital bracelet in it." "The one from the trash?" I asked. "No," Tiffany said. "A different one. It says Baby Girl Cross. And there was a receipt, Meredith. A receipt from a law firm in Columbus for facilitation services. Dated 3 days before my birthday." She let out a sob, a raw, ugly sound that had nothing to do with socialite tantrums. "You were right," she choked out. "God, you were right. I'm nobody. You're not nobody," I said, firmly channeling the voice Constance used when she wanted things done. "You are Tiffany Cross. You were born to a 16-year-old girl who wanted you to have a better life. Diane stole that choice from her, and she stole your history from you. But you are still you." "Who am I?" she asked. "I'm a fraud." "You're a victim," I said. "Just like me. Just like the sister you haven't met yet." There was a pause. "Sister. Her name is Gemma," I said. "She's sitting right here. She's the one Diane gave away to make room for us." I heard Tiffany take a shaky breath. "What happens tomorrow? Are you going to destroy her?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "Whatever happens after that is just gravity." There was a long silence. I thought she might have hung up. "I want to come," Tiffany said. "No," I said immediately. "It's too dangerous. She'll turn on you." "She lied to me for 24 years, Tiffany said. And for the first time I heard a flash of steel in her voice. "She made me think I was special. She made me think I was the chosen one. But I was just inventory. I want to be there, Meredith. I want to stand next to you." I looked at Gemma. She gave a small, sharp nod. "Meet us in the lobby of the Grand Hotel at 6:45, I said. "Wear something black. We're going to look like a funeral procession." The sun went down, turning the sky the color of a bruise. I stood in front of the mirror in the midnight blue gown. It fit perfectly, as if Constance had known 40 years ago that her granddaughter would one day need to wear it into battle. I pulled my hair back severe and clean, no hiding tonight. I picked up the leather portfolio. I checked the pen recorder clipped to my bodice. I checked my phone. It was time. I dialed Constance's room at the hospital. The night nurse answered and held the phone to my grandmother's ear. "Grandma," I said. "Mère, she rasped. "I'm going," I said. "I have the dress, I have the files, and I have the girls." "Good," she whispered. I looked at my reflection. I didn't see the woman who wrote rent checks to her father's company. I didn't see the woman who cropped herself out of photos. I saw someone new. "I'm scared, Grandma," I admitted. "Fear is fuel," she breathed. "Burn it." I hung up. Gemma was waiting by the door. She looked at me and her eyes widened slightly. "You look like her," she said. "Not Diane. Constance." I took a deep breath. "Ready to meet your mother?" I asked. Gemma touched the scar on her lip. "I've been ready since the day she left me in that bassinet." We walked out of the hotel room, the door clicking shut behind us, with a sound like a rifle bolt sliding home. We didn't speak in the elevator. We didn't speak in the Uber Black that took us through the city streets. We were moving with the gravitational pull of a collision that had been scheduled 39 years ago. As the Grand Hotel loomed ahead, lit up like a palace, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for the exit. And the only way out was through the ballroom. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel was a cavern of crystal and light smelling of lilies and old money. 300 of the city's most influential people were milling about holding flutes of champagne that cost more than my first car. In the center of it all stood Diane Prescott. She was wearing gold tonight, a shimmering column of sequins that caught the light with every breath. She threw her head back, laughing at something the governor said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She looked invincible. She looked like a queen on her coronation day. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, my hand resting on the velvet rope. The midnight blue Valentino gown felt heavy against my skin, a second skin of silk and history. I wasn't just wearing a dress, I was wearing Constance's legacy. I took a breath. The air tasted cold and sharp. "Let's go," I whispered. I walked down the stairs. Gemma was on my left, dressed in black, her face set in stone. Tiffany was on my right, pale and shaking, but moving with a grim determination I had never seen in her before. Heads turned. It started as a ripple near the entrance and spread like a wave across the room. The music, a string quartet playing Vivaldi, didn't stop, but the conversation died. They knew about the restraining order. They knew about the police report. They expected a scene, a breakdown, a spectacle of the unstable daughter crashing the party. Instead, they got a phalanx. Diane turned. Her smile froze in place, looking like a crack in a windshield. Her eyes darted from me to Tiffany, then to the security guards by the door. She took a step forward, her face rearranging itself into a mask of concerned pity. "Meredith," she said, pitching her voice so the nearby donors could hear. "Oh, honey, you shouldn't be here. You're not well." I reached the bottom of the stairs and walked straight toward her. The crowd parted, creating a wide aisle between us. "I'm perfectly well." "Mother," I said. My voice was steady, amplified by the sudden silence of the room. "And I think it's time we stopped pretending otherwise." Diane's eyes narrowed. She moved closer, dropping her voice to a hiss. "You are violating a court order. I will have you arrested in front of the governor." "Is that what you want?" I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had already checked the exits. "Go ahead," I said. "Call them. But while we wait, I have some guests I'd like to introduce." I stepped aside. Gemma moved forward. She didn't say anything. She just stood there 5 feet from the woman who had birthed her. The ballroom lights were unforgiving. They caught the angles of her face, the square jaw, the high cheekbones, and they caught the scar. Diane stared. For a second, there was nothing but confusion. Then recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her hand flew to her throat. Her face drained of color, leaving her rouge standing out like bruises. She knew. She knew the eyes. She knew the chin, and she knew the mark she had tried to erase. Who is that?" Diane whispered. The microphone on the podium picked it up, carrying her fear to every corner of the room. "My name is Gemma Hayes," Gemma said. Her voice was rough, unpolished, and real. 39 years ago, I was born at St. Catherine's Hospital." Diane took a step back, bumping into a waiter. No, this is a trick." My mother looked at me and saw a cleft lip. Gemma continued, pointing to her face. A tiny imperfection, completely fixable. But to her, I wasn't good enough. I wouldn't look right in the family photos. So she threw me away. A gasp went through the room. "She sent me to foster care under a fake name," Gemma said. "And she bought a replacement." Gemma pointed at me. "Her." Diane looked around wildly. Her composure was fracturing, pieces of it falling away like dry plaster. "This is insane! These women are mentally disturbed. They have concocted a sick fantasy to hurt me." She looked at Tiffany. "Tiffany, darling, tell them your sister is off her medication." Tiffany stepped forward. She was trembling, but she didn't look away. "She's not my sister," Mom Tiffany said. "And I'm not your daughter." Diane froze. "Tiffany, I went to your office," Tiffany said, her voice breaking. "I found the receipt, the one from the lawyers in Ohio. You bought me, too." The room erupted. Whispers turned into shouts. Phones were out, recording every second. Diane looked trapped. She looked at Howard, who was standing by the bar staring into his drink. "Howard? Do something?" she shrieked. Howard looked up. He looked at me, then at Gemma, then at Tiffany. He looked at the wreckage of the lie he had helped maintain for 3 decades. He set his drink down and turned his back. "You are all lying," Diane screamed, turning on the crowd. "I am the victim here. I gave them everything." Raymond stepped out from the shadows. He opened the leather portfolio. "I have DNA results from 3 independent laboratories," he announced, his baritone cutting through the noise. "I have sworn testimony from the daughter of the nurse you bribed, and I have the hospital logs." He held up the documents. "It is all here, Mrs. Prescott. The fraud, the bribery, the abandonment." Diane looked at the papers. She looked at the faces of her friends, her donors, her admirers. She saw judgment. She saw the end of her reign, and she snapped. "Fine," she yelled, throwing her hands up. "Fine. You want the truth?" She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Your mother was dead. You were a ward of the state. You would have rotted in an orphanage if I hadn't taken you in. I gave you a life, Meredith. I gave you a name. I gave you a future." "And me?" Gemma asked quietly. "What did you give me?" Diane turned to her. Her eyes were wild, manic. "You were broken," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what people would have said? A Prescott with a defect? I did what had to be done. I protected the family name." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. "And Tiffany?" I asked. "I saved her." Diane cried, tears streaming down her face. Angry self, righteous tears. "She was going to be white trash. I raised her as a princess." She looked around the room, panting, waiting for applause. Waiting for everyone to see her martyrdom. "I did it for them. I did it for all of them. I sacrificed everything to make this family perfect." I looked down at the pen clipped to my dress. The tiny red light wasn't visible, but I knew it was recording. Every word, every admission, every twist of her narcissism. I unclipped the pen and held it up. "Thank you, Diane," I said. "That's all we needed." I handed the pen to Raymond. Diane stared at the device. Then she looked at me. The realization dawned, slowly creeping over her face like a shadow. She realized she hadn't just lost the argument. She had just confessed to multiple felonies in a room full of witnesses and a recording device. Her knees gave out. She didn't faint gracefully. She crumpled, sinking to the floor in a pile of gold sequins. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, ugly, guttural sounds of a woman who had lost the only thing she ever loved, her reflection. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They didn't put her in handcuffs, she was too prominent for that indignity, not yet, but they escorted her out. She walked between two officers, head down the crowd, parting for her like the Red Sea, but this time there was no admiration in their eyes, only pity and disgust. Howard left separately. He didn't look at us. He simply walked out the side door, got into his car, and drove away. I watched him go, feeling a strange lightness. He was gone. The enabler had finally enabled himself right out of the picture. The ballroom began to empty. The music had stopped long ago. The governor had vanished. The donors were scrambling to distance themselves. I stood in the center of the empty dance floor with Gemma and Tiffany. Tiffany was crying quietly. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'm so sorry I called you crazy. I'm sorry I didn't believe you." I put an arm around her shoulders. "It's okay. You were surviving. We all were." Tiffany looked at Gemma. She hesitated, then held out a hand. "I'm Tiffany," she said. I guess I'm the one who got your room." Gemma looked at the hand, then at Tiffany's tear-streaked face. She took it. "You can keep the room." Gemma said, a small, tired smile touching her lips. The wallpaper was probably terrible anyway. Tiffany laughed, a watery, hiccuping sound. It was pink stripes. "So what happens now?" Tiffany asked, looking around the cavernous, empty room. "The foundation is ruined. The name is mud." "We rebuild," I said. "But not as Prescott's." Raymond walked over, pocketing his phone. "Constance is watching the live stream," he said. "The nurse says she's crying. Happy tears. She wants to see you all tomorrow." I looked at my sisters. The nurse, the socialite, and the invisible manager. We didn't match. We didn't share blood except for Gemma and the woman who had just been escorted out by the police. But standing there shoulder to shoulder, I felt a tether snap into place. It wasn't biology. It was choice. "Let's go get a burger," Gemma said. "I'm starving, and this champagne tastes like hairspray." 3 months later, the spring air in Constance's garden smelled of wet earth and lilacs. My grandmother was in her wheelchair, a blanket over her lap, but her color was better. Her speech was slow, but the slur was almost gone. The news cycle had moved on, as it always does. Diane was living in a rented condo in Florida, awaiting trial for fraud and custodial interference. Her lawyers were pleading insanity. I hoped she got the help she needed, but I didn't check on her. That part of my life was a closed book. Howard had filed for divorce and moved to a golf community in Arizona. He sent birthday cards. We didn't answer them. I sat at the patio table slicing a cake. It was a simple sheet cake from the grocery store topped with 40 candles. Gemma sat across from me laughing as the wind tried to blow the candles out. Tiffany was next to her wearing scrubs. She had enrolled in nursing school. She said she was done with being a prop. She wanted to be useful. Make a wish. Constance said, her voice raspy but warm. "Both of you." I looked at Gemma. It was our birthday. 40 years ago today, we had been born in the same hospital, separated by a wall and a checkbook. Gemma closed her eyes. I watched her for a second. The scar on her lip was just a line now, a part of her story, not the whole definition. I closed my eyes. I thought about wishing for the years back. I thought about wishing for a mother who had loved me or a father who had protected me. But those were old wishes. Wishes for a person who didn't exist anymore. I listened to the wind in the trees. I heard Tiffany giggling as she blocked the wind with her hand. I heard Constance humming. I didn't need to wish for a family. I was sitting at the table with them. I blew out the candles. "Happy birthday," Gemma said, opening her eyes. "Happy birthday," I said. I cut the first slice and put it on a plate for Constance. Then I cut one for Gemma and one for Tiffany. I sat back holding my own plate and took a bite. It was sweet, simple, and real. I had spent 39 years trying to be seen. I had fought and screamed and bled to be acknowledged. But as I looked around the table at the women who had chosen to stay, I realized the truth. I didn't need them to see me. I saw myself. And for the first time in 40 years, I liked what I saw. Looking back on the wreckage of the Prescott legacy, I realized that I spent decades trying to buy affection with obedience, paying rent for a space I should have owned by birthright. I learned the hard way that you cannot earn love from people who are committed to misunderstanding you, and that silence doesn't save families, it only allows the rot to spread. True family isn't determined by whose DNA you carry or whose name is on the birth certificate. It is defined by safety, by consistency, and by the people who refuse to let you walk through the fire alone. I found more sisterhood in a coffee shop with a stranger than I ever found in the mansion where I was raised, proving that biology is nothing compared to the bond of being chosen. To you listening right now, I want to ask, how much of your own light have you dimmed just to fit into someone else's shadow? How many times have you apologized for taking up space in a room where you belong? We often tell ourselves that keeping the peace is a virtue, but peace built on lies is just a prison with invisible bars. If you are waiting for permission to stop fighting for people who never fought for you, this is it. You don't have to wait for a scandal or a court order to claim your own worth. You are allowed to walk away from toxic loyalty. You are allowed to choose the people who choose you back. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to find your own peace? Share your story in the comments, because the moment we speak our truth is the moment we stop being invisible.